Good afternoon, investigators. Mike Evans and Casey Pine in a minute here with episode 198 of Spy Curious, the Australian Investigator Weekly News. 198 weeks of relevant information for you, the licensed private investigator, corporate investigator, and government investigator. If you are studying at the Australian Security Academy or a graduate Australian Security Academy student, you may have just seen, like quite a few other people did today, Week 2, Episode 27 of our Friday Investigations Uni program. Now, in that program today, we talked about fraud engines and the claims process. And we gave insights to people looking at what happens in general insurance with fraud engines and how they all work. So that happened just an hour ago. We've only just finished that program, and it happens every Friday prior to Spy Curious. So if you're an Australian Security Academy student or a graduate and you want to take part in our Friday afternoon Investigation Uni program, get in touch with me. If I haven't been sending you the invites because of some reason, or I've been blocked by your spam, let me know and I'll get you into that. So that's our CPD program for our AIRLAP members and for our students. G'day, Xavier. Great to see you, mate. I got out of the wind. I hope you can hear me now. It's blowing all the way over to Melbourne. I'm sure it is. Thanks for checking in, Xavier. I'm sure you enjoyed the fraud engines presentation today. Coming up next week will be the CPD in relation to that, and everyone will get that in their email. So what have we been doing at the Australian Security Academy this week? Well, we've been doing our bush and rural surveillance program, and we've had our drone program going on this week. I'll show you some insights from that. One of the things that came up this week was, how do private investigators use drones? Well, we use drones to identify stolen farm equipment, stolen road equipment, trucks, boats, that sort of thing in hidden places. That's what we use drones for car regos, for checking crops that shouldn't be grown somewhere. So someone's stolen some experimental plants from a university and they've got them hidden in a rural location, that sort of thing. G'day, Colin. Great to see you, mate. Thanks for checking in. Good on you, buddy. It's really good to hear from you. So we're using drones for a whole range of reasons. We don't use them for personal injury, but one of the things that come up this week is there is another use for drones that's really important. Once I had a surveillance operation that went on for quite a while, and because the technology back in those days, to get the battery and the camera charged, you could only have a limited time, and we were always constantly crawling through the bush to swap batteries and stuff like that. Now, those days have gone if you need a quick battery change, that sort of thing, because of these. You can fly them in and out at agreed locations. You can send them to exact coordinates, these sorts of things. So the important thing I want to emphasize is, yes, this drone has a battery. There it is. It's got the battery in it. The battery life of that battery in perfect conditions, not like we had in the freezing cold in Tasmania at 1,000 metres this week, the battery life is 30 minutes. That means you've got 15 minutes flying time that way and 15 minutes time flying that way if you're delivering something. Now, my tip to you is, if you're going for extended period in the bush, you can't take a charger because you've got nothing to plug it into, right? Okay. What you can take is 3 or 4 charge batteries with you. Then you've extended the distance. Someone can send you over 5 kilometres, your lost car keys or your toothbrush or whatever, and you, using your battery, can send it back 5 kilometres as well, as long as it's in a visual line of sight, right? You've just extended how far you can send these things. And I'm going to give you some examples. Now, they're exaggerated examples, all right, because I'm hilarious, number one, but I want you to think about it. How can you apply it to what you do? So let's go and see if I can find the video, just to give you something to think about. Pretty scary in some parts, some of these videos, but let's have a look at it.
One of the hazards of bush and rural...
No, that's not the one. This one.
So it doesn't matter if it's your wet pack and your toothbrush, your hat, or Tim Tams and tally hos to make it look like you're a stoner in a dope crop. The drone delivery has got you covered when you're working alone as a surveillance operative in the bush on Bush and Rural Surveillance.
So we're talking about coming across dope crops when you are on surveillance, and it happens. It's happened to me on several occasions. But my whole point is, hello, Casey, how are you going?
I'm wonderful. Good afternoon, everybody.
It's beautiful down here in sunny eastern Tasmania. What's it like on the Gold Coast, where I'm returning tomorrow?
It is so hot.
Oh,
Coming
no.
back to a heat wave.
Oh, that's it. I'm wearing my shorts. Okay, just trying to make a point about drones and the uses of them, people. You can call in what you forgot. Now, Casey says hot on the Gold Coast. It was boiling hot when we were doing bush and rural surveillance. The snakes were out in force, and they were big snakes, and the leeches were crawling for miles. But here's something. I had to call in a drone because I forgot something.
As you can see, I'm here in my camo shirt on bush and rural surveillance, and there's something that really stands out, and it just happens to be my snow white hair. So this is where drones come in handy. I'm going to call in back to the support office to get my camo hat, and it will be delivered by drone. So I'll make the call. Whoa! Now you see me, now you don't.
Okay, so it's Silly Hat Day here at the Australian Security Academy. My point is, they're not just for taking video. You can be caught short in the field and you might need something urgently. You lost your car keys, your toothbrush, whatever it is. Well, that's probably not going to be so urgent. It can be droned in. Let's have a look at that marijuana crop situation.
One of the hazards of bush and rural surveillance are marijuana crops. And while you're focused on doing your job, you can often unwittingly end up in the middle of one, like I'm standing in front of now. I'm getting lightheaded, smelling it. So what do you do when you come across a booby-trapped drone crop when you're on bush and rural surveillance? You're going to have to call in backup. Courtesy of our drone, we now have our cover story, tally hos and Tim Tams. Any bikies or Asian gangs growing this crop of marijuana will just think we're just stoners and we're just there to steal their crop. They won't think that we're licensed private investigators and there could be problems and that we will disappear and they'll never find our body.
Okay, that probably won't happen, all right, but my Tim Tams and tally hos got droned in, so it looks like I'm a drug addict, all right? Instead of me pulling out my private investigator's license, which I haven't got on me at the moment, going, it's all right, druggies, bikies, Vietnamese gangs, whatever. I'm just a licensed private investigator on surveillance. They don't want to hear that. What's my point? It happens. I've exaggerated what you do. What you do is if you're on bush and rural surveillance and you do end up crawling through the bush and suddenly something is wrong and you find yourself you're in the middle of a booby-trapped marijuana plantation, well, first of all, the cops are watching it through their hidden cameras. They want to know who you are. Secondly, there's probably hidden cameras there from the gangs as well, and they have things like shark hooks on booby traps and shotguns on booby traps, that sort of thing. You've got to get out of there just as quickly as you entered in, very carefully. So keep that in mind. Batteries, take spare batteries with you. You extend the distance, you can call in backup and help. That's really important. So instead of getting 15 minutes flying time, you've got 30 minutes flying time. It's a really clever idea that came out. Now, of course, the conditions, they make that difficult. All right, so where we were at 1,000 metres elevation in the cold and our drone operators' fingers were freezing this week, the battery life went down probably 10 minutes to 20-minute battery life. So that affects batteries. Now, batteries are improving all the time, and in 5 years from now or 3 years from now, that won't be so much of a problem. I've got to have a look at some of our jobs that have been advertised this week. There's been some absolute beauties this week. Here we go. ProCare are looking for a senior licensed circumstance or factual investigator, as we call it in the real world. It's called circumstance investigator in Victoria, just like they say Mao, alphabet, and grouse man. That's Victorian speak. But anyway, ProCare are looking for senior circumstance investigator down in Victoria, and they're letting you know that they speak Victorian. So they're workers' compensation, general insurance, you name it, ProCare do it. It's a great opportunity. Apply for that role down in Melbourne with ProCare. You won't be disappointed. DMME, Proprietary Limited in Prospect, Adelaide in South Australia, are looking for a licensed factual private investigator. It's a full-time role and you'll earn between $80,000 to $100,000 per year. They want experience in factual investigations, conducting on-location field interviews, location inquiries, dispute resolution, collecting photographic evidence and providing comprehensive reports to aid and informed decision-making is desirable. So they're saying you must have a Certificate 3 in Investigative Services, a valid and current private investigation licence. They can't employ you without that because it's not the government's decision on that, it's the client's decision. The client, the insurance companies, say we want people who are vetted and hold a private investigator's licence. They've got to be vetted by the government as a person with no criminal associations, a person that hasn't dealt in a commercial quantity of drugs, or a person that hasn't got criminal contacts. That's what they want to know as far as licensing checks go. But anyway, DMEE in South Australia, great opportunity there to earn $100,000 a year as a licensed factual investigator. So they're serious about employing you as an investigator. They want to know that you have the right qualification. They want to know that you have been taught to take statements about negligence and liability. When they see your name on this certificate of CPP 30619, Certificate 3 in Investigative Services, and that logo, they're assured of that. And they know that, okay? So if you did the cheap course and that was convenient at the time, you're going to struggle. You want to do the right course, know about negligence and liability, impress your future employer with the right qualification. Casey, what have you got for us this week?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a really good tip that I realized that I'd only just shared in Investigations Uni, and I think I did it in a talk for the RSPCA. It's a new tool that's come about, and I wanted to share it here on Spy Curious as well for everybody that watches. And it is a reverse image search tool, but it's AI generated. And so it looks at the different points on your face. Instead of just scanning the internet for someone that looks like you, it looks at your points and gives you, I've found, phenomenal results. and it's called facecheck.id. So this is an old Facebook picture that I had years ago. I probably had that profile picture for a good solid 6 months. And so I put it in there, and it runs the checks. So it checks you against other people. It looks at your different points, and then it brings back a whole bunch of photos showing who they think that person might be. It's biometrics, that's the word I'm looking for. So it's brought up here. This is me here with the black hair, and obviously someone's stolen an old profile picture of mine and used it as their Twitter, it's obviously a scammer. It's just a stolen picture, but that's me there. Like, I have dark hair there. If you compare that to the picture that I used, I have like blonde hair, my face is down and tilted. And then you look at this picture of me, it's the first one that comes up. I'm so young there. And that's incredible that it's picked that up. And it's a great way to see if anyone is using your images as like scam accounts, or recreating your account and pretending to be you. It happens so often. And so in here, it was just that one picture. And then we go further down. Oops. Here we go. So I'm on the top left-hand corner again, which is a photo from last year. And that's only 54% accuracy, but hey, like, that's me. And that's only from last year. So you can get some really incredible pictures. Like, if I use TinEye, or if I use Google image search, I've never found those pictures in a search. Especially using that photo, and it's just incredible what it can bring up. So it's a really fantastic tool. So that is facecheck.id. Use it while it's free.
Fantastic. One of the things I lay awake about at night is people using my image. I really do worry about that. So it's very common, Casey. People steal your image, anyone's.
Yeah, so that's like, if you say, we often get like friend requests on Facebook, and they're from like a nice looking person, and they have like a bunch of pictures that they have up on their timeline of that person. They're in different areas, different positions. So you know it's not like a fake AI generated photo. It looks like a person, but they're just stolen off someone's account. So they've gone through and stolen that picture from my account. They would have stolen a bunch of other pictures and added that to their account to look like it's someone. And then they're going to try and get in phishing scams, try and get you a part of botnets, try and get your auntie and your grandmother to buy Bitcoin, that kind of stuff. So that's why that happens.
Fantastic. Great tip, Casey. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Stick around. Don't go away. We've got some news. So big headlines screaming down here in Tasmania, in Hobart Mercury this morning. Tasmanian government lawyers, private investigators secretly film vigil for abuse victims' claims. Well, as I explained last week with our private investigator that assaulted an elderly man who was never a private investigator because he was from Canberra and was never ever licensed, and you can just call yourself a private investigator. I'm an IT genius. So anyway, that screamed in the headlines down in Hobart today because it says private investigator. And what the lawyers for the claimant are doing is they're making a big hoo-ha out of someone going to a vigil for domestic violence who had a claim for something, and trying to get into a negotiating position. We're going to embarrass the government about a private investigator following them around all over the place and put it in the headlines in the newspaper. Now, the newspaper's going to run with that. They love this sort of stuff. You go over to the ABC and they're talking about one that was happening 10 years ago and it's still going on today. And that's in today's news, just because it's got private investigator and surveillance in it. All right. So don't fall for these headlines. There is a reason people do surveillance. It's a last resort. More often, surveillance will prove a claim for a person that it will deny it, which is quite an interesting fact that everybody seems to forget about in all the emotion and all the excitement about headlines screaming about private investigators. Other things that have happened in the news this week, there's been some, got to go here first. Massel, looking for a senior factual investigator in Victoria. 5 people from the Australian Security Academy this week graduated, and they all work now for Massel. That's absolutely tremendous. Last year, there was some 4 people they put on Australian Security Academy graduates at Massel in Victoria. They only do workers' compensation investigations. Congratulations, everyone at Massel. Well done. That was really good to see. I was really proud of that. This was in the news this week. How police solved the mystery of a VHS tape depicting a sexual assault. So a man has been jailed because of a historical sexual assault on a female. And how it all came about was he'd been divorced and he kept asking his wife to get into the garage because there was stuff he wanted. This made her suspicious. She knew him. It made her very suspicious. So she went looking for whatever it is he was looking for. And it ended up being in a box in the garage, a couple of old VHS tapes. And the ex-wife watched one of these VHS tapes and she sees her younger husband in various sexual acts with another unknown female who was not consenting and appeared to be drugged. So what he's done, he's taken her out, he's drugged her drink, and then he's taken her back home and he's sexually assaulted her and he's recorded it on video and then transferred that or just recorded directly onto a VHS tape. So she's watched it and she thinks, I've had enough of this. So eventually push comes to shove and somehow or other they go to the police and they report it. Now, the police look at it and they listen to it and they identify that the person who was sexually assaulted, the lady, was from a certain country in a certain area, and she had a very unusual first name. So through good policing and through good detective work, they located the lady, they interviewed her, and they spoke to her about the relationship with this guy back years and years and years ago. Now, she had no memory of it. He's slipped horse tranquilizer into her drinks, right? And she's just basically knocked out, has a headache. All the way through it, in the tape, it shows her saying no, she's not consenting, he's going ahead with it, all that sort of thing. And when the police interviewed her, they interviewed her first and didn't tell her anything about the tapes. They just asked her about the relationship. She had no memory of it whatsoever. And so then the police told her about it. And then they started to get down to brass tacks about it and how many times they met up. And it was only twice or whatever. And it's all in the newspaper. You can Google his name, you can see it. But it was really good police work, seeing what they did. She ended up in court over it and they accused her under cross-examination, they accused her of watching pornography and enjoying watching people being sexually assaulted, that sort of thing. She's a very brave young lady, very brave, to go ahead with what she went ahead with and end up having this man prosecuted and jailed as a result of it. So that's a really interesting one that's come up in the news this week. That's the guy. So that's a historical sexual abuse claim, that one. This is a beauty. Happened down in South Australian prison, manager jailed for stealing inmates' cash. Life's going to be pretty tough for him. So that was in the news. You can't make this stuff up. And, the other one that came out down in Victoria, not that guy, I'm sick of him, been there, done that. Down in Victoria, another ex-police officer has been accused of accessing a police database in relation to his ex-wife or partner, whatever, and there's a real furore down in Victoria about that at the moment. He claims he didn't do it. They're saying he did do it. He's saying it's old news, it's all over. They're just rehashing it, never happened. The number one sackable offence in the federal government and state government are state and federal government employees illegally accessing databases. So cheer yourself up. You want to know where Chris Hemsworth is today. So you've got access to that information in your police database or your transport department database, and you type it in. You had no reason to do so. Poor old Chris is innocent, didn't do anything, and you've been looking at where he lives and his wife lives and that sort of thing. You cannot do it. Right. So this guy's got himself into some argy-bargy with an ex, and he's gone and done that. It's in the newspaper this week. You can check it out. It's in The Age. You are watching episode 198 of Spy Curious. Never access databases. Never get a police friend to access a database on your behalf. You might think you're getting ahead of all the other investigators and being better than your competition. No, you're about to lose your license. That's what's going to happen. Some jobs. GRS are looking for a trainee private investigator in Sydney, New South Wales. Now, they advertised this a couple of weeks ago, so they either didn't get many or they've had a lot of success with it and they want another one. I don't know. You'd have to ask GRS that, but they're looking for someone who's a licensed investigator in New South Wales, so you hold a CAPI licence. That you have strong analytical and critical thinking skills. Now, that's very important as a PI. You must have that. Excellent interpersonal and communication skills. If you're a narcissist, you should never be a PI. You've got to have good communication skills. Willingness to learn and adapt to new techniques and new technologies. Investigators over the last decade have had to adapt to PCs, then Macs, then laptops, then tablets, then measuring devices. It's always changing in technology, and they want people that run with it, not fight against it. So if you're looking for a trainee role as a private investigator in New South Wales, get in touch with GRS Investigations. All these jobs are available at the Australian Private Investigator, Corporate Government Investigator Facebook jobs page. There it is. That's all you have to do is jump on Facebook, type in Australian Private Investigator, Corporate and Government Investigator jobs, and ask to join. You have to say that you're an Australian resident and that you're seeking work as a private investigator. That's all you have to do. And I will personally include you in the group so you can see these jobs. SureFact are looking for licensed investigators in Sydney, and it's due to the expansion of their decade-old business, which has been running for 10 years, equals 1 decade, and you'll be required to conduct factual personal injury investigations in New South Wales and or Victoria. This is opportunity of the week. If you're a licensed investigator who holds an Australian Security Academy CPP 30619 Certificate 3 in Investigative Services, SureFact know that you have been trained correctly. You can take statements correctly. You conduct records of interview. You can write reports. You can even do surveillance if that's required because you studied at the Australian Security Academy from teachers who are actually licensed private investigators, not ex-cops. So that's a big tick when you go down and apply at SureFact for work as a private investigator in New South Wales or Victoria. Sorry about that. Got bad editing at the end. One of our social networking sites this week, people asked, and it's probably one of my most common questions that I get, is what sort of camera should I have for this? Or what sort of tape recorder, a digital tape recorder should I have for that? Which equipment should I get? And people get all excited about jumping on Google, finding the most expensive U-Butte equipment. I used to. All right. That's what they do. What does an employer want? I really want you to think about this.
People are constantly asking me, what equipment do I need and should I buy the most expensive and best equipment out there? It's not such a matter of owning the most expensive equipment. It's knowing how to use the equipment that you have. That's what an employer is interested in.
Knowing how to use it is better than having the $3,000 digital tape recorder or digital recorder, sorry, and not knowing how to use it. It is so vital that you know how to use it. You know what to do if the battery is looking flat. You know how to replace the batteries. You know how to make the thing work when it's required, because you can't go back for a second interview embarrassingly and looking silly. One of the interviews I had before we started in Tasmania was with a very experienced barrister, loss adjuster and private investigator. And he said to me, he just laments so much the amount of times he has to go and tidy up stuffed up investigations by people that couldn't use the equipment or thought they were great investigators, were untrained, had no idea what they were doing, and made a mess of the code of conduct investigation, the workers' compensation investigation, or the general insurance investigation. Now, he's an Australian Security Academy student, graduate, and he holds our Certificate 3 in Investigative Services. Like I said, this is what employers want to see. They have faith in it. They know that you are going to know how to take a statement. Now, the big advantage is you also become a member for free of our industry association. You get access to our Friday University CPD program. One of the other questions I get asked a lot is, when I get my Victorian qualification, I only get a one-page statement of results. Now, the reason for that is that's what the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division require. When you graduate in Victoria, you're sent this, you are to make a certified copy of it and send it in when they ask you to in the application process in Victoria. They have a specific time frame and you must send that in when they request it, not at the time you apply for it. You don't have to have it at the time you apply for it, but that's all they want to see. Certified copy of that. If you send the original, it'll just sit there in your application, in their applications room where there's 130 security guards a week and 2 private investigators a week applying, and you send in the original. That just makes it too hard. So it sits in the too hard basket, and they don't even tell you why. They don't have to, because you didn't follow their instructions. Follow their instructions, certified copy, everything will go smoothly. That's really important. Now, just because you get your industry association certificate in the same envelope as you've got your one-page statement of results for Victoria, you don't send this as well. It doesn't add extra weight to it. This helps you personally. It doesn't get you the license, right? It's just a bonus which separates you from people who are not members of an investigation industry association and don't do CPD. So that's all that is. It's to help you get the job over other applicants for it. I think I've covered our job interviews. I'm just going to see what that is. Oh, that's right. I've done that one. Done that one. I think I've covered everything from my end, Casey. Anything else going on at your end? Started any new courses this week?
No, still doing my advanced course. Still going. It's a very long course. But I actually, I wanted to mention, I got a question this week on my email about, because I talk about setting yourself up an OPSEC, so like obfuscating your identity online, especially when you're doing investigations online. You need sock puppets and alternative accounts. You never look at someone's account from your own personal account. And we were talking about like having a phone which just has like a $5 SIM from Aldi, and that's where you set up your Instagram account, your Twitter account, all those sock puppets, so they're just nicely here. They're not on your everyday phone. Like, this is an old phone that I smashed, bought the new one. We've all got one of those. It doesn't even have to be an iPhone. It can be like a $120 smartphone from Coles. So to set up those kinds of accounts. But you can't get around having to provide identification when you set up the SIM card on that phone. So I believe it was since the Twin Towers and terrorism laws in Australia, they forced phone companies, because you used to just be able to go buy a SIM and you didn't have to provide any ID, and you could just set it up and you were done. Now you have to provide certain points of identification in order to show who you are. He was worried about that. My answer is, you are not going after criminal kingpins. You're not the police. They have to worry about that stuff. They have to look at ways to get around that, to completely stop that information being leaked. But we don't. If I'm working in a case that might look like it's going to be that dangerous, and if I felt like I was going to be compromised, I'm a private investigator. That goes to the police. If it's getting that dangerous, if it's looking like a criminal case, it goes to the police. So you shouldn't have to worry that much, but you definitely want to protect yourself by having soft puppet accounts and having, if you're studying now, get them set up now, because the longer you have them, the better it works in your favor. So I've got some that are 4 or 5 years old. And they're just fantastic. So start them now and use an old phone, $5 SIM from Aldi, and you're good to go.
Had a case where the police officer was investigating a person who had 26 mobile phones, and each one was labelled and laid out on the double bed. So all the frauds he was committing, he could always follow them, quite exactly. And the police officer was part of the raid on the house, and they had to climb over the fence, and he fell off the fence and broke his leg. So as a result of that, he had some 3 months off work, and he was in a lot of pain. And I'll tell you what, life for that fraudster became very difficult after that.
It's very organised, though.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you've got to think about the results of what you're doing sometimes.
Yeah.
So, what would have just been gone and forgotten, leave your gate open if you're going to commit fraud. So here we go. So this is what I missed before. Investigations Uni today, our participants, our graduate students in there were looking at fraud engines and the claims process. So we looked at what a fraud engine was and the parts of the how it all works in fraudulent claims, that sort of thing. It was a real insight. This is what you get when you study at the Australian Security Academy. Because we're private investigators, we investigate general insurance fraud, and we know what fraud engines are. Okay, so that's a benefit you get from choosing the right investigation agency. Had an inquiry today. Young lady, she's in New Zealand. She's a licensed private investigator. I think she's emerging. She hasn't really established herself, and she's looking at Australia as a bigger market and wants advice on how she can get work in Australia. Well, that's really easy. So if you want to work as a private investigator in Australia, you jump on the Australian Security Academy Private Investigator Corporate and Government Investigations Facebook page, where we show you all those jobs that you saw today. Now, there's a lot more than that. All right. I have got people looking for workers' compensation investigators in New South Wales, for liability investigations in New South Wales. If you don't know what liability investigations are and you're an Australian Security Academy student, you should, but that's coming up very soon in our Investigations Uni. So keep monitoring what's coming up on that. I think liability investigations is coming up on May 5th, May 5th. I haven't got my lighting on in this room like I usually have, so that was a bit of a wild guess. So don't buy your ticket to leave New Zealand tomorrow on the basis that you're going to get work in Australia today. If you can do workers' compensation investigations, take statements, and write reports, and if you can do general insurance investigations or code of conduct investigations, bullying, harassment, racial discrimination, there is work for you as a licensed private investigator. Someone said to me the other day, I should join one of these industry associations and go and see their statement taking presentations at their event. Yeah, well, that's great. You're learning, you're growing professionally if you do. That's really good. And I'm pleased you're thinking like that. But here's what I want you to think about. You can put yourself up as the greatest statement-taking teacher in the universe and be a hero for 60 minutes at an industry association event. That's wonderful for you. To become good at taking statements, get out and take them. After 5 years, you'll completely master it. You will be the walking encyclopedia of taking statements. You won't be on day 1 to 100, but you will be after 5 years. You'll be the absolute go-to person for it. It comes with practice. Even the most hardened detectives, it takes them 5 years to get their negligence and liability statements perfect, so they don't have to be chased up in the office for missing parts and corrected and all that sort of thing. So don't you as an emerging investigator think that you're behind the 8 ball because all these experienced HR people and police and all these other people are doing perfect statements. They're not. No way. Right? 1 hour at an industry association event on statement taking is great. It's a good start. But taking statements and doing it continuously, combining that with your CPD and a record of your CPD, like you get when you go into the Australian Security Academy's training programs in the uni after you watched our video there and you do your CPD, that's what counts. It's over the long term. It doesn't come in 60 minutes. We don't teach statement taking in 60 minutes. It takes 45 hours to get it to basic starting, where an employer is going to have confidence in you. So keep that in mind. The other question I got was how to become an investigation instructor from a student this week. Now, this is a really good question. The student said she has the 5 years industry experience that is required. Under the Australian Vocational Education and Training System, whatever you're teaching and instructing in, you have to have 5 years industry experience. Casey's got that. I've got that. Pat Flynn's got that. The other instructors you see in here, they've all got that. The other thing you have to have is a certificate for in training and assessment. It was a 2016 version. There's now a 2023 version. You have to have that as well. Now, that's a big barrier. It's $3,000. Okay. It's 12 months of study. You're going to be doing stuff that you may never, ever have to do as an instructor. Validate assessments.
Yeah.
Right. Now, Casey and I did that a year ago for 3 long agonising days of validating assessments. But we match our assessments, we validate them to the performance criteria and what's required in the unit of competency and the element of competency. We have to do that for you, our students. We do that because we're doing that in the office with Pat Flynn and others at the design point. 28 private investigators designed your private investigation, government investigation, loss adjusting, risk management program, all the ones you see were designed. We don't buy them off the shelf and sell them to you as crap, right? This is the real deal, practical application of how it happens. So you've got to have that qualification for an RTO to take you on. That's TAFE, university, any RTO, that's how it goes. It doesn't mean you have to, give up your ambition of becoming an instructor in your field of expertise and your career that you love. You have got really valuable experience after that 5 years. You mastered statement taking after 5 years. I just said that, right? So you've got to get that Cert 4 training and assessment as well. With that, 5 years industry experience, and you hold the qualification you're teaching. You have to hold it. So in investigative services, it's CPP 30619, Certificate 3 in Investigative Services today. If you have the old CPP 30407, you can't teach Certificate 3 in Investigative Services today because it's the old qualification. You have to have the new one. What's the difference? New one's got records of interview in it. It's got 3 units of statement surveillance in it. The previous one only had 2. So it changes to keep up with technology. Right? It changes to keep up with expectations. This one has records of interview in it. Government investigation, if they do a record of interview, they want you to confess to a crime. In insurance investigations, as we found out today in Investigations Uni, we want to get exact detail. You're not guilty of anything, but we want to know the service history of your vehicle that was in the accident. And that comes from a record of interview. So it's two different applications for the same thing. Don't confuse them. That's really important. You keep disappearing, Tony. G'day, mate. Good to speak to you. Great to see you, buddy. Say g'day to Evan for us. Hope it's great down in Adelaide. Footy starts next week, mate. Everybody's excited. So, to teach, hold the qualification you're going to be teaching. Loss adjusting, risk management, investigative services. It's on now. G'day, Evan. Tony. All those things come into it. You can get experience teaching. You can approach any RTO and say, look, I'd like to do some teaching for you. They can negotiate with you about it, how you go about it. They'll give you a bit of a run, and you can get experience. Everybody does. You can't assess. You can teach, but you can't assess. To assess, you have to hold that qualification. All right. You can be a guest speaker or a guest expert. You can.
That's a great way to start.
Yeah, it's a great way to start. Casey and I, we go and speak at Rotary programs, things like that. We don't have to have a qualification to do that, but we're networking and marketing, and in there are people from insurance companies. All right, so you constantly go, put yourself out there. You can have a very successful career as a teacher. 23 years ago, I thought I'll start this RTO, Australian Security Academy, until I get a real job. 23 years later, I have employed a lot of teachers, and I've paid a lot of tax, and I've paid a lot of employee benefits, and a lot of people have benefited in their career from that. Not just my team, more Pat Flynn's teaching, Casey's, as you've seen today, other people's as well. So I encourage you, go out and teach. If you've got the experience and the qualifications, go and do it, all right? And build it up over time. Doesn't happen straight away. You get better and more confident with it by putting yourself out. It's nerve-wracking in the beginning, Casey, isn't it?
Yes.
What you're going to do is you're going to think, oh, I'm going to be teaching these classes and there's all these ex-cops and detectives and barristers there. Yeah, they are. They are in what we do. That's our classes. People say to me, you're all beginners. No, we're not. What word we're not. We have intelligent, sophisticated people that want to learn what it's about and will not accept RPL. You can't pull the wool over their eyes. You can't. They know what's genuine and what's not. So that confidence will come as you put yourself out there because you've got the 5 years industry experience. That's where it all wins. You're teaching what you know. You're not guessing what you don't know. One of the horror stories I was told was a Greyhound Racing Regulatory Authority. They signed up to get certificate for in government investigation. They were all ex-detectives, and the RTO sent the work experience person to the class to read out of a book to them. That's just total. They took the money and did that. You can't do that. That's why we have the qualifications. That's why we have ASQA, who are the regulator to monitor that sort of thing and to police it. So with all that, people, stick around, Casey. Got to talk to you. We'll see you again next week. Spy Curious. Hope you enjoyed it. If you want to get involved in Investigations Uni every Friday, our CPD program, and you're an Australian Security Academy student or graduate, get in touch with me. See you again next week. Bye from Tassie.
See you next week, guys. Have a great weekend.